series. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and very good evening and very good morning. Good evening to all Indians and those who have joined from this region, and good morning to the other part of the world. Dr. Asgary, thank you very much for a wonderful, very prolonged kind of introduction. So I'm very grateful to York University and personally to you for taking this initiative from your side and from our side. Dr. Anuradha, she's there, and our whole team from International Institute of Security and Safety Management, New Delhi. So our institution is also more than 3 decades old and have been working in this area. So it's a very good time for us to collaborate for a very, very kind of important series. And there we are calling it the starting point is the business continuity. This is very interesting for us, as well as my career also started with this continuity. As Dr. Asgary has mentioned that I am an economist, and sincerely, if you ask me, I never had this exposure before 1992 in the disaster management. So when I was working in the institution called UP Academy of Administration, largely a training and research center for training of the bureaucrats of the country. So there we had a 2-3 series of kind of a disaster, earthquake, 2 earthquakes in the same state. That's called Chamoli earthquake and also Uttarkasi earthquake. And in 1992 also there is a Maharashtra Latur earthquake. So that actually had a kind of initiated discussion in our institution that what is this happening all around, because 3 in succession with a very short span of time. So I was deputed to see and give a report. So I was thinking I'm an economist, I'm not a disaster management person as say. And during that time, not this word was also not very much known, disaster and climate, as a kind of a popular parallels. So we were thinking that how we should be going, and reluctantly I did go because it was the duty and so we had to perform. So when we saw there and we found that kind of devastation, and that devastation actually led to think that how actually going to recover from this kind of a devastation. So everything was paralyzed, be it the roads, the bridges, the housing, the hospital infrastructure, power infrastructure, telecom, and so on and so forth. So this struck to my mind that this is not a kind of a disaster alone. This is a kind of a derailment of development. And that derailment of development, meaning thereby that it's going to a huge time for the country to repair and recover and start back to the original or even better position. So that was the challenge in 1992, which we started. But one fundamental question kept haunting us during that time, that when we are talking about recovery and reconstruction, whose recovery we are talking about? Whose business continuity we are talking about? The big people, the medium term, or the lowest of the strata of the society, those who are running very, very small business. So how to knit it together? Because the bigger one dependent on the medium term, and medium term were dependent on the interdependency were all the 3 levels. So that was the kind of a challenge, that how to knit them together so that the backward linkages is maintained, production is continued, and the forward linkages can also go hand in hand. So that kind of a challenge which we had. So from there, our interest emerged into the kind of economics of disaster. So what is the economics of disaster when we see? In India also, when we did study, when I was working with the bank, we had a kind of a study that how much disaster is actually creating impact in India. So that time we made a study and we found it's really affecting 2.5% of the GDP and 12% of the revenue. It's a big chunk. As a country, developing country, they are losing it. And then we started looking into that kind of a disasters which was happening. So same example, when we see disaster, disaster is not a kind of a one type of disasters. The business environment is very, very dynamic and very, very changing. So in this business environment, how to maintain the GDP and how to maintain that economic activities on in primary sector and the secondary sector and the tertiary sector. So this was the challenge, and this is a kind of a continuum. It's not that it's ended there. So it is continuing each disaster after disaster. As I said, disaster is not an earthquake. Disaster is just not hurricane. Disaster is just not a flooding. Disaster is not a cyclone and so forth of forest fire. But disaster is also terrorism. Disaster is also kind of a leading forest fire. Disaster is also factory blast. Disaster is also like a kind of industrial accidents. A disaster is also kind of the massive disruption in the transport system. So all these are actually affecting the wholesome business. And very good example, which we have seen that we always keep saying, and globally people keep quoting, unless we change and adapt to the changing situation, probably our business will keep affecting. So that Kodak is the biggest example that we say, and once upon a time, which we say, it's like a story of a old kingdom. There's once upon a time there was a king. So it's like that once upon a time there was Kodak, and which used to actually monopolize the photography and kind of a system. And now 90% to zero, it's bankrupt, totally closed, because adaptation was not there. So the changing environment, the invasion of mobile phone, you can say, to the kind of a photographic system. So what I'm saying is that disaster is also changing its profile, and it's also giving us surprises. It is also giving kind of uncertainties multiplied with the case of astonishments, which we never expect, and it happens, like COVID-19. We never imagined such kind of a basic event, and you said, Professor Asgary, that how COVID affected, and you have shown the graph. So that is the biggest challenge for supply chain. The whole world was standstill. So we never expected that will happen, and it happened. So what we learned from there. So I would just kind of very quickly, I would share some of the slides to show our audience that how we see that when we say 9/11 leading to 33 billion of US dollar losses as per the Reserve Bank data. Similarly, when we say Haiti earthquake, 7% of the GDP, it's again a big number. When we say Katrina, $186.3 billion. So what I'm saying is that disaster, disaster, and disaster. And these disasters, like in India, we have been able to identify 33 types of kind of disasters which is leading to geophysical environment, which is affecting climate related, then also we say hydrometeorological, then we also say the geohazards, and then also we said human induced disasters. But of late we're saying that every disaster is a man-made. So now in this kind of a scenario, when changing global geophysical environment, and there is also a big conflict, another issue, like we are seeing with what is happening in the West Asia. So this all the interconnectedness of the world, when we say that world has become one entity, and in this one entity, that it's not that we say that basic fundamental principle of balance of trade, which we say, and balance of is that the comparative cost advantage, and the whole world got established their business and the trade accordingly. So the chain of the system which is happening all around, we see that how it is affecting our business, how it is affecting our supply, how it is affecting our movement of the products, how it is moving from one place to the other place. So all these examples. So just I will quickly like to share my slides. Can you see my slides here?
Yes, we
Is
can
it?
see them.
Okay. So that's what I was thinking. That's one that we are saying that we are living in the world of interconnectedness. We are interconnected. So any disruption happens anywhere in the world, that business is likely to be affected heavily. So that fact which we have to realize. The second very important is that we are also moving into a kind of a unpredictable kind of a challenges. We need to understand what is we are expecting, but we need to also understand which we don't expect it will happen. So that we need to see, and you highlighted very much about the cyber attacks. As the technology is growing in this modern world, we are also seeing that how the ransom is taking place. In India also, we face severe problem. All India Institute of Medical Science was attacked and cyber attacked. The whole database system collapsed. So what I'm saying is, this is the reality in which we are operating. So what we are saying that world is not the same. In a dynamic environment, we also need to change. We also need to adapt. We also need to look at. So that's what we are saying, that which are the drivers which is aggravating these challenges for the time to come. So whether we're saying risk drivers, the natural hazards, and the biological hazards, or recurring kind of a situations. So if you see that poverty, inequality, population, and all these things, these are the things which will matter. But side by side, what we see that this year alone, 2024 and 2023, across the globe, what we have seen, the temperature rise. Initially, we were saying, all the climatologists, they were mentioning the rise in temperature is 1.2, but now it is revising to 4 point something, some degree. So this is not a kind of just a digital number, 1.2 or 1.4. It has a major significance on the route which we travel and what the business or the goods and services are getting are provided. As you know, in this changing environment where the climate risk is very, very high, cyclonic storms are very high, hurricanes are very high, the intensity has gone up. So that is leading to disruptions in the sea or the port. And 60 to 70% of the supply chain is dependent on the sea route. So the sea route is not the same as it used to be. So how, whether our transport system has been able to design to cope with that, or we need to change that. So in this dynamic scenario, we have to look all those things. Like we say, the temperature is rising. High temperature is also not allowing to venture into the sea, and your mechanics doesn't work accordingly. So that many boilers and other things have been designed to operate on certain levels. So all these we need to look at, that what we say, that our ceteris paribus, which we say, everything remaining constant. It's not like that. Business has changed, environment has changed. So we are into a very, very dynamic world. People's choices have changed, people's behavior have changed, and across the globe, you said also that geopolitical environment have changed drastically. So in such kind of a scenario, how we are going to see this, that I'm just showing this, the kind of, you have mentioned also, I'm also mentioning some of the challenges which were Mexico, Turkey, earthquake, which has happened very recently. And then this is the photographs which I brought as a kind of a cascading impact. India, the state of Sikkim, is a hill state, very small state, but it is a huge impact on the economy and the business continuity. So one dam got burst, and along the river, the power failure was there. And due to the absence of power failure, all the production units got closed, many of them. So the production got hampered, supply got hampered because it's also damaged the road transport. So river transport is not much here, but road transport is there. So road got damaged because of the slides. This cloud burst led to the damage to the dam and also to the road transports. So this heavily impacted the economy of the Sikkim state, and interdependency in the state is very high. one state is dependent to other state. So not I'm saying that global macro aggregates that supply chain is a problem, but also supply chain is a problem interstate within the country as well. So goods flows and flow and services is not that smooth as it used to be in this condition, and just doesn't remain confined to say 2 days or 3 days. It's a long process. Still, many of the things have not recovered, and this is happening through like when I was working with the World Bank, I had an opportunity to have a kind of a long-term recovery projects of Gujarat in India is a very famous state, as a very progressive state in terms of business, and also that very kind of a making higher contribution in the GDP. So that state got affected very severely in 2001 earthquake. So again, the 2001, and then we said 1999, we say as they call it a super cyclone Orissa, which is largely kind of a sea-based, there's kind of in India, we have a 7,300 kilometer of the 7,600 kilometer of the coastal states and the coastline. So you can very well imagine our ports and the water transport system. And on the other hand, when we are having earthquake, on the other hand, so country like India and many other countries also facing same point of time or maybe quick succession, several disasters. So when we are talking about business continuity, when we are talking about supply chain management, when we are planning for this, are we actually accounting for all these disruptions? This is the major challenge of accounting for disruptions. So if you forget about accounting this, the challenge is this. So I'm just quoting 2018 flood in Kerala. If anyone can see that our delegates, I'm sorry about this, but you can say impact of Kerala earthquake, Kerala floods, which happened after 100 years. Because complacency also happens when it doesn't happen for long. We tend to kind of believe that it has not happened last 100 years, so it will never happen again. So that kind of a complacency also in the business actually not paying much. So you see that impact in 2000 in Indian INR, we said 26,000 crores of rupees loss in 7 days, 3 to 7 days of floods. So what I'm saying is, and every sector has got impact. It's just not power sector. It's not the road sector. It's not the manufacturing sector. It's but social sector. So every sector. So when we talk about business continuity, forward linkages and the backward linkages, warehouse to the movement, the supply. I'm not saying that every country will take those kind of steps like Amazon has taken place. Amazon did face such kind of a problem. And after that, they made investment, and they're starting, instead of dependency, they're starting off a kind of independency. So they became independent. They had the warehouse, they have the connect, and they have everything. So that Amazon is a classic example of progress and business continuity. So same way that Walmart. So those examples are there. But if you see those examples are existing, but see what happened say 10 days ago in Vietnam. Vietnam has a larger port and transport and everything, and it's the massive damage what happened to it. So what I'm saying is that it's not that just a kind of a production. If you have the production, you're not able to supply. But if you have a supply, you have the everything intact for supply, but you don't have the production. That's also happening, which has happened in say Thailand flood, because business and the changing world, that like Toyota doesn't have everything there in Japan, so they have a kind of a in Thailand and other places as well. And when Bangkok flood took place, Thailand inundated, the production was closed, and so they could not meet the supply as per the demand which they had. They had booked for that, and they could not supply. So that's how the challenges we face in the business. So Kerala was one example I was saying. And see, this kind of a situation, if you see, you will find, and this what I'm saying is the road transport, you can see that lot many trucks loads are actually stand still and not moving. So in the same way, that only you can rescue people, but you cannot rescue the, as Dr. Ali also said, livestock. And also that said that many of the perishable commodity, which has very small lifespan, cannot move to the right place and it gets destroyed on the way itself. So this is the kind of how business people, those who are into big business, those who are into middle business, or the kind of a smaller investment business, how and what kind of examples. So another example we say from the state of Orissa in India. Similarly, as I said, that 1990 was a kind of a watershed in India for disaster risk management. But in 1999 was the watershed, but in 2019, this happened. And again, we had a kind of a similar, almost, although we could reduce death to zero almost due to cyclonic storm, but the business affected kind of in a big way. So almost leading to, we said again, 30,000 crores of rupees. And it's just a kind of loss which we are showing that this a government loss and the pay a smaller unit loss. But private sector loss is not included in this. So it will almost go to the 50 to 60,000 crores of rupees. So billions, which we said Dr. Radha will help in converting 30,000 INR into US dollar in billion. Maybe in between she would share with all of you. I'm just sharing that, see the public building, roads, water resources, energy, wash, every sector is getting affected when it comes to the disaster scenario. And every time you keep saying it's not a kind of this is of Assam flood 2024, 2023 scenario, all the two together. And you see that from where you can take your goods and can see that if you have the warehouses, how you are protecting your warehouses in such kind of a scenario. So from warehouses to the trucks will take to the road and road will take to the port. And then port is also punctured because of the storms, cyclonic storms. So what is the resilience of this business? That we need to actually look into this, that how the challenge for the generation is to seeing this situation is multiplying manifold. Like earlier, this kind of a scenario in any country, be it Vietnam, be it Bangladesh, be it Pakistan, be it India or Sri Lanka in this part of the world, or be it in the Southeast Asia, be it Japan, the 2011, what happened in Japan? First earthquake happened. Then earthquake led to tsunami. And then tsunami led to flooding. And flooding led to the nuclear emergency in terms of that total darkness, as Japan has a 99% of the power supply comes from the kind of a nuclear power. And then the other crisis emerged that people in Japan started making a kind of a note that we don't want any nuclear plant now. So that was the kind of a social unrest started. And in such kind of a scenario where the cascading thing is very high, one leading to another, how to make our business resilience. So this is a challenge which we are looking into, that this is the challenge of the, and see, in this kind of a scenario, this is the number another thing, where port and that port will provide services and sea to sea route and see that how and which countries are getting high number of disaster scenario. So the darkest color is this, the highest or the most vulnerable countries, which has a largest number of kind of incidents of disasters. And same with Africa, but where China is producing the maximum, America is producing, India is producing, Australia is producing, New Zealand is South Africa, but all these countries, they are producing, but will they be able to supply in the same way as it used to be? So this is the kind of scenario which we see that they are affected. The coast is going to get affected. Coast is going to have a high sea level. And in this high sea level, if any storm will come, they will have the high surge as well. So how our transport system, water transport system is going to be a kind of a resilient mark. So I'm just repeating climate scenario. So I will be, so point which I'm trying to make is this is the challenge which we see across the globe and which is happening, we need to realize. And side by side, heat wave is also leading to a kind of a industrial fire and accidents. So those who are into production, how this production is going to be stored within the kind of a production system if the production system itself gets affected by kind of an industrial disaster, a low maintenance or the high heat, whatever the reason may be. But this is a kind of a reality of today, where we see as a kind of a scenario. Another, you see that where you have a warehouse, you produce and keep it in the warehouse, and then malls where you retails are there. So what is happening? Even if within a retail is there and it's a catching fire and the heat wave and is actually raising this, and the doctor also mentioned that we are seeing as a Amazon fire or California fire or Canada fire or India forest fire. Everywhere this kind of a thing, cases are multiplied manifold. So one is the ensuring raw material, then also ensuring transport, and also ensuring the warehouse, and also ensuring the retail shops. So this is the example of which where we are saying that these are the, if you disaster is happening and interruptions, the disruptions which is happening, and that recovery will take time. So how we are planning our recovery, how we can reconstruct our business, and how we go for the long-term recovery. So that is the kind of a planning process which we need to focus. While when making investment in the business, whether be it smaller or the medium term or the big business also, export, import, as you mentioned about the trade deal and all, whether the trade regulations also protect this, whether the trade regulations also give this kind of an incentive to the affected business. So what kind of an incentivization process we are bringing into negotiations in terms when we talk about that restoring business and restoring supply, restoring. It's not that you don't supply, then other countries is not. Interdependency is such that if you don't supply, you don't reconstruct, the other countries will start affecting. So it's an interconnected world. We need to have a kind of a cohesive mechanism, kind of a integrated mechanism where all countries come together and start looking into a kind of international solutions for addressing issues of business interruptions due to disaster and climate change. So risk, data, and the digital identity which we need to look at. And this kind of disruptions are staying this also from this side of the world. So how in such situation, which is increasing, and if you see the data, GAR report, Global Assessment Report has a release of UNDRR 3 days ago. They are giving hundreds of examples like this, and also talking about that this kind of a disruptions is leading to much more impact on the economy. So another transport system, what happens that how much your transport system is resilient. One example I was talking about, the road transport, now the rail transport, where the goods and services are provided, this disruption. You see that what happened in tsunami, and whole of the seaport, all the small jetty, even the jetty is not working. If jetties gets damaged, its repair will take time. So how the port, and there India faced the largest problem in the tsunami affected state, so that it had to be diverted. Transport cost went very high. Then so that the price of the important air, this then government has to come for the capping of the price and so on and so forth. So I'm just narrating these kind of a supply chain shocks in terms of in the world of global dependencies, supply risk is increasing in terms of logistic and transportation. So how this and the COVID-19, I would not repeat, he has already mentioned. So in the digital cybersecurity is also mentioned. So we need to look at that when we are depending on the technology, the cyber risk is also, we always say that the moment like so we click a kind of a selfie and we put it on the website or the Facebook or social media, we become vulnerable to the cyber crime. So in this kind of a world, how our data is secure, how business ransom is not there in terms of, this is the impact which I'm saying I'm not, this is the example which I was referring to, the car manufacturing which was happening, the Toyota, Honda, Nissan and Ford. And the Thailand was the main hub for this. And when the Thailand got affected, the whole of the business, Nissan and Ford suspended production in Thailand. So this is the biggest impact. So business continuity is not that your production unit is X place, your warehouse is Y place, distribution is in Z place. And also your raw material is coming from some another place. So in this kind of a connectivity or connected world, how we are securing the transport system. So just final point which I would like to mention, that how business continuity of any organization or any investment is ensured, how we are planning for minimizing financial losses, how we are enhancing coordination or mechanism which we are developing together across the globe, regional, region to kind of international, in the time of disaster, climate change, and the conflict. We need to look at those. So how that resilience can be built. So Walmart approach is another very good example. As I told you about this, Amazon is another good example. And like many companies have also followed and survived, but many could not follow, so they could not survive. So we need to have a kind of a swift response, flexibility, and we also have to have a kind of a decentralized decision-making process. We need to engage many kind of a, maybe we can think of insurance and other industries roping in for supporting losses and how to start business very soon. Then again, that I have already mentioned about the liquidity and other challenges. So in a nutshell, what I would say as an example, 4 5 things, 5 points which I would like to mention, that what are the unfolding challenges in the summary of this. First is the challenges of the dynamism. The in a geopolitical environment has changed, and that challenges is not the same as it used to be. So business as usual will not work. We need to redefine, relook, and re-strategize our whole of the supply chain management. This is the number one point in the changing environment. Second, we need to acknowledge the unpredictability of many disasters, situations, business environment. How we are going from expected to unexpected, and then unexpected to the black swan event. So these things which we need to accommodate in our planning. Third, very important thing, these disasters and the kind of a rerouting of the freight and other things will lead to other higher freight charges, and that will lead to a kind of a inflation. So how these challenges of the time to come, we are going to, the business people can look into, those who are into. Then the port congestion. The port congestion, country have to work for expanding the port congestion, and also expansion of the port must acknowledge the changing level of sea rise, this one, and the temperature both. So how our water transport system is planned for the future for addressing such issues. Fifth, which I would say, that making rail and road as a kind of a resilient, so that the movement of the flow and the freight and the products and goods and services is smooth. And of course, the drought is a very silent disaster which we don't talk about. But drought is going to create as a major supply chain disruption as per the kind of challenges which we see tomorrow, in terms of whether it's talking about agricultural inputs or when we say the inputs to the industry. So there we need to look at that how globally we are going to see in the change of climate, the new dimension of drought, which is a silent killer, which we say as a kind of a major accommodation which we need to look at. So we need to look at in terms of that how and what kind of a strategy for the big business. One size fit to all will not work. What kind of a public policy which we need, or policy for trade we look for the medium term. And the third, in the changing challenges which would be protecting the very small businesses. In most of the developing countries and the small island countries, this is the biggest challenge for protecting our the people who are into a small business, and their livelihood are much more dependent on them. So big business can survive with the big loan and the facilities, but the smaller business people were like in India and other places in South Asia, we see once they are out from the business, they never come back to the business. So we need to see that how our policy is very inclusive, in terms of business continuity and give opportunity to everyone. So I would stop for the question and answer. Thank you very much for the patient hearing. All my colleagues, my friends, those who have joined. So I would stop and I would love to answer to your questions.
Hi, Dr. Kumar, and hi, everyone. Thank you all thank you for that great presentation, and thank you as well to everyone that joined us in the audience for being here. I think we have a few minutes for questions, and I see that a few have come in here in the Q&A. So I think yeah, we can get started with the Q&A part. So first question comes from Michael. They ask, in many respects, organizations operating in fragile contexts may be more sensitized to threats and the importance of risk management than their equivalents in more stable contexts. Example, OECD, such as the recent floods in Central Europe. Do you think that this poses a communications challenge for risk management professionals? Are organizations beginning to recognize the importance of robust risk advisory function at the executive level?
If I have understood the question properly, like communication, which we say, redundancy is very, very important. Many of the places which we have seen in the disaster scenario, especially, the first casualty comes on the communication. So even if you digitize everything, and we are going globally, that digitization process doesn't have the kind of a redundancy as it requires. Especially on what we have seen in the developing countries, especially in India and the South Asia, and also Southeast Asia. The data which I have given you, that any sector you talk about, whether communication tower and other thing, even if the mobile towers and other thing on which the whole communication system is banking upon, whether we go for the 4G or 5G or so on and so forth, this communication, we need to have a kind of a redundancy. If that survives, then definitely, and because many of the places we see, as I gave you example of the Sikkim barrage, and also that example from Orissa, where the power shortage was because of the power failure in the power sector. So 15 days it got out of power, and then the no mobile function was there, nothing was there, so complete blackout. So we had to arrange a kind of a genset system, the big genset system, and then you start your operating your minimum to go to the maximum. So what I'm saying is that we need to look at that. It's very good that we go digitally, but idea is to how to have a redundancy. That is also important. And third is also we have to have a mechanism, alternative mechanism, so that one fails, then we survive on the second, and when that fails, then to the third. Because satellite, that phone that survives, but it is very expensive. So we have to go for innovation and research that how such kind of a communication the global players can give as a kind of a low cost kind of a communication system, so that the cost of communication itself get reduced. Otherwise, it will have to, whether we say that consumer has to pay the price for that everything.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think so thank you for answering that question. I think that answers the first part of the question very well. I think just quickly, if part of the second part of the question was related to whether or not you're seeing, I think they're more interested in like whether or not organizations are starting to recognize the need for this kind of redundancy or these kinds of risk management.
We need
like,
to.
yeah, at the executive level, like. So yes, okay, perfect. Thank you so much. And then, so we have another question from Ranjan, who's asking how to maintain business continuity in emergencies. Is policy level mechanism at national and global level, or how to maintain continuity of small scale industries in emergencies for sustainable resilience? And then there's the second part to their question: is corporate resilience framework for continuity for business available at national and global levels?
I would say this is the responsibility of also chambers of commerce operating in each of the country. They have the association. So how and also the Ministry of Corporate Affairs with the Department of Disaster Risk Management. And they all have to come together. We are working within silos. because our assumption is that everything remaining constant, and which is not the case in reality. So all have to come together for thinking that this is a new challenge, the dynamic challenge. We will also not knowing that what are the unseen kind of a risk, which is actually impending one, which we say that's not happened yet, but it might happen. So in such kind of a scenario, we need to work together and see that what kind of a association consortium, which can win-win situation to everyone, then can work together so that the low cost investment can give them a bigger result. But if you work in silos and don't address these issues collectively, probably that will not be able to make the world kind of a smaller scale or the medium term or the long. Interdependency is already proven. So everyone is interdependent to each other. So how to protect is the bigger industries have to come forward with such policy to protect the middle one, and middle one has to protect on the smaller one. Such kind of a scenario. So insurance company not alone can serve the purpose, but what I'm saying, one is the government policy that should support, and also that corporate policy and corporate governance should also come for addressing such issues for long-term kind of quick recovery for the business. So they have to also come forward, anticipating such kind of a dynamic risks and the cascading risks and come together.
Great, thank you. And just being mindful of time, we are about 3 minutes over the scheduled time. Are you okay to keep going with a couple more questions, or? Yes. Okay. So then following up on just what you just touched on regarding the role that insurance can play, there's a question here from Dr. Sapan Asthana asking exactly that. So if you could explain a little bit more like the role that insurance can play in disaster management as an industry itself.
Sorry, come again. I couldn't.
So they're asking if you could explain a little bit more about the role that the insurance industry can play in disaster management.
Yeah, like many of the cases, like we did one study also, and we had in India also that example. We invited all the insurance companies to see that how insurance could be a kind of a risk transfer mechanism. Like those many people, like we say these days, going for insurance, and Turkey started this kind of a when earthquake happened. After that, the earthquake, Marmara earthquake happened. After that, Turkey government decided to go for insurance. That all those housing were reconstructed. The government gave the kind of a premium to the insurance company. So if it gets repeated, the government doesn't have to pay that price to the people, but the insurance company can bear that cost when it comes to. But the premium will go from the kitty, and each individual will insure their housing. Same happened in Gujarat. Gujarat earthquake, I was personally engaged with that. So in Gujarat, when the 3.5 lakhs of houses were getting about talking about the housing, and then comes to the business. So housing was that the government was reconstructing that house, and government was giving dole to the people. So, and it is a high risk area, as we say, zone 5, many high frequency, high intensity area. So government decided to come up with the policy and ask for the 10 years of insurance to start with, and with a minimum premium to the insurance company. But all the insurance company they're not ready with the products as well. So, and they never wanted to take all those risks together. So insurance company combined together. So 5-6 insurance company, and still the government has to bear the brunt of 50% of the risk, and 50% distributed amongst the insurance companies. So what I'm saying that time, I'm saying 2001, but now insurance industries have grown up, matured, and see that many things are happening across the globe, and they are coming with the different products. So for business also, they are coming with their products. They are incentivizing insurance also, and also insurance products. So in India, I steered the process of this working group was constituted by the government to see that how insurance can play a risk transfer kind of as a mechanism, and also parametric insurance in India, where X or Y or Z kind of on certain parameters, it happens that each and everyone in that area will be given certain amount from the insurance company. The premium will come from the government to the insurance company. So Still, we are looking into that who will pay the premium is a debate, but the national health insurance and other way. So in different kind of insurance programs are coming. So disaster risk management is also having a big role where the insurance companies, government has also asked to see that how very, because when it comes to the payout, then there is the kind of a trust deficit comes in. So there is the insurance company. That's what people believe in the government is the lender of the last resort as a kind of ultimate insurer. So here we say that the role of private sector is very important. So insurance company and the reinsurance company, where the risk is very high, all have to come together. So it's just not for the housing, but a kind of a whole sector approach. So there they can protect business as well. Many of the businessmen, they are taking insurance and they are surviving. They're going ahead with that. But it's not as a kind of, there is still the gap, the funding gap. So X amount you have lost, you get only X minus something. So still there is a gap. So we need to work on it. There are many countries that have already going ahead with the insurance. India too is trying. Some part of the states in like Nagaland, Meghalaya, northeastern state in India have started taking as a pilot. But Gujarat was one example. But agriculture insurance, Tamil Nadu and other places there. But earthquake or kind of a multi-hazard kind of a one packaging and kind of a one product and then insurance is a people are working it out. So maybe it would be a kind. Otherwise, contingent liability budget would be keep going high and high in the government. And then contingent liability is not a kind of a productive investment. So that's what we need to reduce that contingent liability and go for the productive investment. So how to have that kind of a balance. So insurance is considered one. Insurance and reinsurance could be a big financial market, and financial industry have to come up for business continuity as well as protecting consumers.
Great, thank you. Yeah, thank you for that in-depth answer with the examples of case studies you've worked on. That's very interesting. Just a couple more questions. So we have one from Sayani Chaki, who asks if private supply chain management teams can work with disaster management teams, and if so, how do they each make a profit?
Very good question. That's what we are recommending. We need to evolve strategy. So what we said that in many countries, we have a chamber of commerce, they operate. They can take it so that any agency doesn't have to go kind of a one every industries to get. So separately, we need to combine there. We have also kind of authorities in India, many of the countries in disaster management, and also institutions which are working on disaster risk management. 20 years ago, things were not there in place. But now institutional systems, legislation, policy, that all have come into. Budgetary provisions are also coming. So mechanism which I would suggest that let us have a dialogue first with the agency. Once we start dialoguing about this as a kind of a addressing risk and business continuity, many things would emerge. So example which I can give you from Gujarat is industries and Gujarat and also in India, with other places also what we say in Orissa and also in Kerala, which started. That kind of approach which took place with a lot of discussion happened with the business people there. So how to start business. So handicrafts was one of the things. They're the marginalized people. So they had lost the maximum. So they were not able to supply to the medium term kind of industries. So their protection mechanism evolved. And similarly, the big industries came. But it remained as a kind of a one isolated event kind of a thing. It doesn't get institutionalized in the system. So what I'm saying, every disaster happens, we take some good innovative steps, but it dies down itself after the kind of a time. So what challenges the institution, like we say that CIFAL, your ISSM, UNITAR, our challenge is to take this together, start the dialogue, make them together. So institutions' role are very, very important in actually bridging those gaps and also the trust deficits, and institution can bring those innovative ideas across the table also. Universities and institutions have a bigger role to play.
Great, thank you. And I think that leads perfectly into the last couple of questions, which I'll ask you together because I think they're kind of related, just maybe at a different scale, but I think the answer can maybe apply to both. So we have Ranjan asking how to strengthen local level community and business community planning. And on top of that, Ankur Sony is also asking, how can we manage business globally despite all these disasters? So is there a link between maybe how business planning can start at the community level and be expanded to the global level to be resistant or resilient to all of these ongoing disasters?
Yeah, risk analysis is the first and foremost step to be done. Whenever we are making business investment, even if I'm supposed investing $100 in my small business, I need to do the risk analysis. Just not the kind of a demand analysis. We always do the demand analysis, that what is the demand and where is the market. But we also look at the invisible risks also into account, which is not there, but this is there. We don't see with our own eyes, but somebody is seeing that risk is there. So idea is to look at the risk at the ground level, the district level or the below district level authorities. They have to come forward and sensitize people also. We have to have a more dialogue with the local businessman, business groups, trade groups. So a kind of a as a kind of a business continuity, as a kind of a, you can say, movement. It's not that a kind of a one-time dialogue will serve the purpose forever. Business is going to be there and disaster is also going to be there with high intensity. So how to make a resilient? So we have to learn from countries' knowledge, from sharing knowledge, how Indonesia is doing, how Malaysia is doing, how Philippines is doing, how Canada is doing, how America is doing. So in this interconnected world, in the world of internet, knowledge pass through very easily. So how to get the advantage of this technology, have a kind of a dialogue more and more. And where I can see that, again, I would say that the role of local institutions which are there already, universities, institutions, and the national level institution, international institution, they all have to collaborate together for bringing such kind of, we have to invest in research as well, that what kind of a thing which worked, like when we talked about Amazon dialogue, how Amazon there, but everybody is not Amazon. What I'm saying, that good practices of Amazon, can this be translated into the small business management also? So their management school, B schools can think of taking up those kind of a learning and bringing and training our youngsters, the youth who are coming and taking the charge of the world. So they are not taking the risk-free world. They are taking the charge of the world which is full of risk. And there they have to operate the business. So that the generation which is going to join us and which is there already, youth, they are there, they have to play a very critical role in this kind of not only the local, but also to the global institutions. It's not that global institution doesn't, like when we talk about World Economic Forum or UNCTAD or other World Bank, ADB, kind of they also have to come together and see that how they are helping actually institutions to grow, strengthen, and taking care of the business.
Great, thank you. I saw if there's time, there's one more question that came in while you were answering that one, if you're okay with one last question, and then we can end the Q&A here. So the question comes from Ayush. Apology if I'm not pronouncing the name right. But they're asking, how can developing countries deal with disaster management while increasing business activity in their country?
Many ways, what I'm saying, when we say the future challenges which we say, one, that we have to see that in which business environment which we are working, number one. Number two, what are the exposure of risk this business environment has? What are the potential kind of challenges of the business? Which are the organizations which have the what kind of expertise who can do the work for any country? So institutions, those who are working, research organizations, capacity building organizations, and other institutions which can play a very critical role. Then there the corporate house, big corporate houses have to come together and support. Public sector enterprises, they also have to come and support. Like in India, we have a earlier corporate social responsibility. The disaster management was not there, but in India, the corporate social responsibility in India, which has given due importance to the disaster management also. So many countries, we see that how other countries are actually tackling this kind of a challenges. Like say 9/11 happened, and after that big economic losses happened, the business continuity was a challenge. Similarly, when we see that Canada forest fire in there and that how, so country have to look and see that holistically, like we have a National Disaster Management Authority in India. So disaster authority is to see that specific programs related to disaster. And that in the National Disaster Management Plan, we have a National DMP plan. So there, each and every ministries have been given role to play in terms of risk reduction. So there, like corporate ministries also been given such kind of a challenge. So the Ministry of Commerce have also been given some work to do that. So what I'm saying that public policy support is one which is very much needed. Then corporate governance also have to make changes and make shift, acknowledgement of the fact that environment is changing, the dynamic. Third, we need to the players, identify those players, who all are the players, the knowledge players, the skills player, and also that players who can go for the innovative research and kind of, they can support. So institutions are there in the country. Most of the countries, they have the institutional system, but also we need to partners. We have to cooperate. We have to also collaborate. So collaborate, say, as we are collaborating and trying to understand and finding solutions together. So the same way we need to look at that, what are the institutions who can play a very significant role in this. So those kind of a learning have to be brought in and knitted together in the local level planning. So middle level planning. And the disaster management institution have to initially play a very major role and taking these lessons forward to the corporates and the corporate governance. And maybe later part, then it will go in automated role, kind of a role, and they can start taking and challenges and taking it up. But institution which have been created over the years, nationally and internationally, United Nations, World Bank, ADB, UN, UNITAR, CIFAL, York, and like ISSM, NIDM, India. These kind of institutions have a larger role to play. They have a larger responsibility. I'm saying not only the role, they have the larger responsibilities. Individual professionals, they're also having their kind of a role. We need to look at and knit together. I'm joining the dots and taking this to the right person. That is the very important thing to do. So we need to highlight and have a more dialogue with the institution which were dealing with business, those who are teaching business, and also institution, those who are dealing with disaster management. And government has to facilitate the process.
Great, thank you so much. I do see a couple of more questions coming in, but I think if anybody has anything that they really want to follow up, I'll put my email in the chat so that everyone can see it. And please feel free to email me if there's anything you'd like to follow up on, and I can pass on any questions or comments.
And from my side. So before you close,
Sure.
I must say that first we need to realize that this is a dynamic world. Things are not what is today, it will not be tomorrow. So in how to have a kind of a flexible environment in which we start operating. So maybe we have to see quick challenges of the local level and also at the middle level and also at the top corporate. One is that, which I would say that logistic distribution. We need to look at that as a how things are. Then we have to see address the production delays, because this kind of a disaster also affect that. I gave the example of say Toyota and others as a production delays. Also, we said as a kind of a that how we are going to supply that quickly in terms of the mode, which we're saying the port expansion and other thing, and the times to come in the changing climate. And then also in the high inflation, which we say this kind of a disaster will also lead to the inflationary state as the inflation, and then how to do the commodity pricing at the local level, the middle level, and also at the highest level. I think these 3-4 things which we see as a kind of a system, and no can replace the innovations. So, which is not known. We need to constantly research, and also give this knowledge to them. More of a dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those closing words. I think that's a great way to end the session with some insights and thoughts on how business continuity can continue in the future and the steps we need to take moving forward for continuity and resilience purposes. So thank you so much for the presentation. I see a lot of thanks in the chat as well. People really enjoyed it. So I'm sure they learned a lot. I know I apologize for joining late, but I definitely learned a lot from from what I was able to catch in the last hour or so. I'm sorry.
Thank you so much. What I'm saying.
Oh, of course. No, thank you so much, and thank you to Dr. Anu as well for helping organize the session and the series. And so we really appreciate the partnership with SSM. And of course, thank you to everyone in the audience for taking the time to be here, interacting. And
my heartfelt thanks to York and to you and Dr. Asgary and all the distinguished delegates who have joined on my personal behalf and also on behalf of the International Institute of Security and Safety Management. And special thanks to Dr. Anuradha and you. Thank you for coordinating this.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Francesco. Quickly, do you want to announce the next one, the date for the next session, or?
Yep. Yeah. So so just as a reminder to everybody, this is going to be a monthly series. It takes place on the 4th Thursday of every month. So our next session is on October 24th, same time. And so anyone who's already registered for this session is automatically registered for the whole series. So you will be getting automatic reminders to join. But if you think that this series could be of interest to anybody in your network or just anybody that you know in general, please feel free to share. And the website or the posters or our social media posts with anybody in your networks that might be interested. Our registration for the series is always open and it's always free until the very end of the series. And for anybody who wants to revisit the content from today, you can visit our YouTube page. We're CIFAL York on YouTube, and also on the same series page where you registered. The recordings will also be embedded under each session. So those will be up in a couple of hours from now. So if anybody wants to share those videos as well or revisit the content, please feel free to do so. And I see a question that just came in about the certificates. So the certificates will be offered at the end of the series for anybody who has participated in at least